Hello, you lovely cubs. It's the Dragon Lord here, back again with What If Tanjiro Had Hockey Part 2. Now, you guys hit the like goal last time. This video will also have a like goal, so if you want the series to continue, you know what's up. And yeah, there's not much else to say. Like, subscribe, join the Discord, and let's get into it.
Yeah, you better listen. I'm bringing heat. You'll be a fan when I start rapping. Way I'll have your fucking head spinning. I'm known as spit vicious. Release bombs and go tick tick. Boom, you gon' leave that head missing. I'm a phenomenon. Stacking cheese like it's Parmesan. 8 different flows, call me Octomom. I'm moving fast like the Autobahn. And I'm independent, so I'm not your fucking starving like it's Ramadan. Sick, twisted, gifted. Can't copy, printed. Can't hold me down. I shape shift, I'm liquid. I killed this beat. I might get convicted. They know how I move.
Tanjiro would follow Orokodaki and they would eventually find themselves at Orokodaki's house. Now it would be dawn, and Orokodaki would help Tanjiro put Nezuko in a futon so that she can sleep. Afterwards, he would signal to Tanjiro to follow him and they would go up the mountain together. And once they reached the top of the mountain, Orokodaki would say, "Reach my house or the bottom of the mountain by morning or you fail and I will not take you in as my student." Tanjiro is confused and then in an instant Orokodaki just vanishes and Tanjiro thinks, what do I do? And he's sitting there and he's pondering and then he just runs. So he starts running down the mountain and he triggers this trap and then using his observation haki he dodges it just barely. He could smell it, but his observation haki was faster than his smell, so he relied on that more. He then kept running down the mountain and he realized that there would be more traps, so he used his observation haki and his smelling to see where the traps were, and he would dodge most of them. He'd have trouble breathing, but he would quickly resolve that by taking lighter breaths, and he would run down the mountain, and he would actually arrive down at the mountain after 2 or 3 hours because of some traps still hitting him and him getting stuck in those traps for a bit. But he got down the mountain, and Orokodaki was quite surprised. He was happy, so he said to Tanjiro, "You are now my student. We'll start lessons tomorrow. Take a rest." So they ate together and then Tanjiro went to go rest. The next day came, and Tanjiro and Orokodaki start training. Orokodaki basically tells Tanjiro all of the basics with the sword. He tells him how breathing works, stuff like that. And Tanjiro remembers this from his father, like the breathing technique, and he asks Orokodaki if it is possible if he knew somebody by the name of Tanjiro Kamado, which was his father. Now Orokodaki says no, and he asks why he would ask that, and Tanjiro says, "Well, my father, when I was young, always told me something about breathing, and he did this dance, so I thought for a second that maybe we could be, a demon slayer family as well, but I guess I'm wrong." Now, Rokodaki is interested and he asks Tanjiro, "Can you perform this dance and do this breathing?" And, and Tanjiro says yes, and he does it. So he does all 12 of the segments in quick succession. And Urokodaki, he sees this and he says that it could be a Demon Slayer technique, but that he's not certain of it because he hasn't seen it himself. So he hands Tanjiro this sword and he quickly tells him some details on how to hold it. And then he says, if you ever saw your father dance with something in his hand, with a tool or anything, try to repeat that, but with this sword. Now, Tanjiro didn't know that this sword was special. This was actually a Nichiren blade. So Tanjiro would then perform the first segment, as Orokodaki requested, and to his surprise, it was an actual breathing form. So Orokodaki said, "Yeah, you have a demon slayer ancestry." Now, Tanjiro was still, surprised. He just cut this bamboo pipe in two, and he thought he saw flames for a second, so he was sitting there like, what? And then Orokodaki explains, yeah, you have Demon Slayer ancestry, and you could be well connected to the Flame Hashira even, so that's quite good, actually. So maybe we should contact them, maybe trust them with the secret of your sister, and then ask them to take in you as its disciple. Rokodaki, he offers this to Tanjiro, but Tanjiro, he saw how powerful Giyu was, so he asks Rokodaki if he could still train him in the way of water breathing because he wants to use water breathing as well. Now, Rokodaki says water breathing might not be suited for Tanjiro's body, but he can always teach him the basics, and then Tanjiro can develop from there. So, a few weeks go by, and Tanjiro watches, he learns all the moves from Rokodaki. He writes them down in a book, but instead of just watching them, he uses observation haki, and he focuses all of his senses on how Orokodaki moves so that he could copy those moves. And yeah, he does that. So he performs the slashes, stuff like that, and then Orokodaki, he keeps teaching him the moves, and eventually all the moves are taught. Tanjiro has run down the mountain over 100 times with more difficult traps, and he has perfected his breathing, by sitting under the waterfall, stuff like that. And then Orokodaki says, I have nothing to teach you no more, and then brings Tanjiro to the massive boulder. He points at the boulder and he says, I'll let you take final selection when you can cut that boulder, whether it be using water breathing or flame breathing, you can choose whatever you want. Now, this was 4 months after Tanjiro originally started training because he learned fast because of him copying the moves with his observation haki. So he prepares to strike and he strikes the boulder and it's cut in half. He did it. Now, Tanjiro was still confused on why and how he could do it because he thought that, he was nowhere near Orokodaki. And then Orokodaki, he's seeing this and he's kind of baffled. And then he says, Tanjiro, this rock was not meant to be cut by anyone. And you just cut this. This means that you mastered water breathing to perfection. Every move you did was perfect. And Orokodaki's like confused. He's never had a prodigy like this, and he asks Tanjiro what he did, and then Tanjiro just said, "When I was observing you do the moves, I would look into the future to see the move, and I'd observe for those 2 seconds that I could look into the future, and then I'd still watch you do it with my observation haki on so I could see every little move you did. And then I rigorously trained to copy those moves to perfection." And Orokodaki, he says that Tanjiro, if he could basically learn any breathing style if he did this. And Tanjiro, he's quite happy about this, but Orokodaki then says, okay, you can take the Slayer exam. And then Tanjiro says, okay. And then Orokodaki, he answers again. But he says, there's a slight issue, Tanjiro. You're gonna have to wait 2 more months for the next Slayer exam. And Tanjiro, he sees this as a plus because that means he can focus on these other powers he has, hockey and stuff like that. And Orokodaki, he kind of realizes this, so he's like, Tanjiro, if you need any help trying to figure out how to train those powers, let me know, because I will help you to the best of my ability. Also, if you want to dive into further trying to figure out how to do that flame breathing, we can also do that. It's up to you. Now, Tanjiro, he chooses the hockey instead because he kind of already has a rough grasp of the flame breathing and the moves from the dance, and he can already do it. It's just the breathing is hard for him and he's not used to it. So, well, he used the breath in the past a lot, but since he's been using water breathing now a lot, for the last 4 months, he hasn't used the fire breath at all. So he's now not used to being able to breathe with it for a long time. So at most, he can only do 30 seconds of fighting while using the Hinokami Kagura or the flame breath or the sun breath, but we're going to refer to it as flame breath. So at most, he can do 30 seconds. So he wants to figure out haki so that he may figure out more about his body and what's more suited in what situation, stuff like that. So he talks with Orokodaki and he says that he has these three different powers. And Orokodaki, he asks, okay, let's split them up, give them different names, and then we look what their strengths are and what you can do with them. And he explains that one of his powers kind of lets him coat himself in this force that could be visible or invisible depending on how he does it. And he shows it, so he shows that his hand turns black and it has kind of this purplish aura around it. And Orokodaki says, interesting, what does that do? And then Tanjiro says it basically makes it to where I hit harder and I can use it as defense as well. So if a sword strikes this, it won't instantly cut off my arm, something like that. And Orokodaki's quite interested by that, and he asks, what else can you do with that? And he says, I can put it on my weapons, but I haven't trained that as hard, so it's hard for me to do. I used to put it on my axe when I was chopping down trees, but I'd only be able to do 10% of the time. I'd only be able to do it 10% of the time. And then when I was fighting that man named Giyu, I was only able to do it around 20%. If I, afterwards, when I tried it, it only worked around 20% of the time. And Rokodaki says, alright, well, does it make your weapon stronger? And Tanjiro says, yes, it actually just makes it sharper. It allows me to cut through things easier. And Rokodaki's quite surprised by this because that means that it's going to be really helpful with him and his breathing style. So he says that they should call that armament haki. And he doesn't exactly know why himself, but he felt just that it felt right. So he says that they should split up the powers with the name haki, but they should name them special things. So he said armament haki. And then Tanjiro explains the second power, which is observing things, and he can feel the emotions and the intentions of beings and living things. And he can also see 2 minutes into or 2 seconds into the future if he really tries. And Urokodaki says, okay, we should call that observation haki since you're observing them. Tanjiro agrees, and then he shows his last power, which is Conqueror's haki. And Urokodaki feels a bit uneasy when Tanjiro used it, and he says, what does it do? And Tanjiro says, so far, if what I can get from it, or what I know from it, is if a person is weaker than me, they'll pass out. But for the rest, I don't really know what else it can do. And then, you know, Urokodaki, he called it Conqueror's Haki. Now, Tanjiro did say that he used it when Nezuko turned into a demon and it instantly calmed her down and brought her back to her senses. And it actually brought her back to her senses so much that she didn't look at the blood like she wanted it, and she protected Tanjiro more. So Rokodaki, he thought, huh, you might it might be able to bring a demon back to their human senses, or you might be able to overpower a demon and control them. That's what Orokodaki thought. Now, Tanjiro was pleased by this because that meant that he could get answers from other demons, stuff like that. And then he says, okay, well, I should probably figure out a better use for it. And Rokodaki says, yeah, but he says that he should focus on the armament haki now then his observation haki, and then his conqueror's haki, and Tanjiro does. So 2 months fly by, and Tanjiro now has a grasp. He can completely coat his sword or his axe, but definitely his sword because he's not going to use an axe anymore. He can coat his sword in haki completely, and he completely mastered it. Observation haki, he trained, and he can actually see motions better now. He for when he was training it with Orokodaki, for a split second when he was exhausted, he could see through Orokodaki's body, and he was confused by this, and he could feel like when he saw that for that split second, he could see every movement Orokodaki made, and he means, and I mean everything, like little joints moving, stuff like that. And he panicked, and then the power was gone, and he can see up to 3 seconds into the future with it. And his smell actually became better as well. So Tanjiro started relying or started training his senses to train his observation haki. And his smell actually explosively got upgraded to the point where he can, his smell power or his smell sense or whatever you want to call it, has greatly improved. Now, for Conqueror's haki, he can use it whenever he wants, and he could almost make somebody like Urokodaki stumble, but and that means that he can take on most lower demons that are not, strong enough to be underlings of lower moons. So that made him quite happy because that means that he has an easier time. Now, Oro- uh, Tanjiro, of course, is going to take the Demon Slayer exam because it's been 6 months. So he takes the Demon Slayer exam. And there's not a lot of people there. There's only about 5 people taking the exam. And Tanjiro, they let him loose on the mountain, and he kills nearly every demon on the mountain. He finds the green demon, and instead of being scared, he knows that he can beat it easily. Because of observation haki, he can kind of size up his enemy now. So he was talking to the green demon, and then the green demon, he explains that he killed Orokodaki's students. Now, Tanjiro, when he slept, he could always feel that there was 2 people or even more watching him. And he had this dream of a little girl once with a fox mask, and a boy who had a fox mask as well. And they were talking to him, saying to take care of Orokodaki for them, and that their names were Sabito and Makomo and stuff like that. And Tanjiro felt connected to these children, and it was confusing to him, but he did feel connected to these children. And however, the green demon or the big demon, he gloated that he killed those people, and for some reason Tanjiro just felt this rage. And Tanjiro realized that the green demon was about to attack him using his arms under, so Tanjiro jumps up and dodges. The green demon is surprised, but then sends his arms after Tanjiro. But in an instant, Tanjiro just cuts all of them and cuts the demon's head off without even using armament haki. And he just sees that the demon is slowly, dissipating, and then Tanjiro puts his hand on the demon's hand, and he just sits there, and he kind of has remorse and sympathy for the demon, so he begs Buddha to let him be reincarnated in a good next life. And then, Tanjiro continues on, and in the 7 days, he had killed basically 75, even 80% of the demons on the mountain. So there was only a select few left. And then Tanjiro went back to the where he was supposed to go to finish the exam. Now, because of Tanjiro, 2 other people survived the Slayer exam, and they were thankful to him because he had saved their lives, and they were not strong enough to be demon slayers, but they thanked Tanjiro, and they then see the two little girls that they saw before. Now, the two little girls congratulate the two other demon slayers, but they don't congratulate Tanjiro. And Tanjiro gets kind of left out, and then they tell Tanjiro to wait. So they help out the two other slayers, pick out their oars and everything, and then the two other slayers, they get, you know, sent away. So the two other slayers, they go away, and they then, find, then they talk to Tanjiro, the two little girls, and they say that Tanjiro is exceptionally strong, that he's, at least that he could be a Hashira right now with how many demon he has already slain. So they tell him that if he ever needs anything, he should just ask his Kasugai Crow, because he's now a valuable asset to the Demon Slayer Corps. They then help him find, fit his outfit, his Demon Slayer outfit. They then help him, or they, show him the ores, and he uses his smell again to find an ore. And he then, gets everything else. He gets his Kasugai Crow, and then he leaves. He gets home, and Nezuko's awake, and she hugs him, and Orokodaki, he comes out and he hugs Tanjiro, and Tanjiro, he looks at Orokodaki and he says, I took revenge for Sabito and Makomo. The green demon is gone, and he will no longer plague them. And Orokodaki, he was already kind of crying because Tanjiro made it back. But then he started crying even harder, and they just had a kind of group hug moment and a family moment. Then they go back inside. Tanjiro and Orokodaki eat, and they kind of feast. Orokodaki gives him this gift, which is actually a box where he can put his sister in for Nezuko, so she doesn't have to be in the sun. Or, well, she can't be in the sun, but it's to protect her and while he moves. And Tanjiro thanks him because it's a very nice box. He also tells Tanjiro that he should seek out the Flame Hashira to maybe figure out his fire breathing technique that he had, and he definitely says that he should. So now Tanjiro, he waits for his sword, and a week later his sword finally arrives, and he was training his haki in this time. And the swordsmith, he's very excited because he made a sword for a child of fire. So he says this to Tanjiro, and Tanjiro puts the sword down. Now the sword is different. It's got a slight pattern on it because Tanjiro chose a ore that was even more fitted to him because of his stronger smell. And he was surprised by this, and he grabs the sword and it turns black. Now the swordsmith, he's confused, and then Tanjiro says, I might be from a demon slayer family, but our technique, I don't know how to use it that well. So maybe that's why it's kind of like a coal that's not on fire, he explains. And the swordsmith is disappointed, but he asks what Tanjiro's family did for a living. And Tanjiro explains, well, we are coal burners, but I also used to hunt animals for their pelts, and I sold those. And then, the blacksmith, he realizes, oh, right, coal burners, black, makes sense. So, yeah, he leaves, and Tanjiro is happy. Now, the Kasugai Crow comes, and he tells Tanjiro to go to a new mission objective, but this is not the same mission objective as he would have gotten to go get that girl, because it's a year and a half earlier than when he originally became a demon slayer. So Tanjiro, he sets out the next day, and he arrives at this small village that has been ransacked by demons, the gold and stuff like that. And then a woman runs up to Tanjiro because she saw that Tanjiro has a blade, and she begs him to help because this demon has been coming to steal their children at night, and they're very sad. And then, Tanjiro asks where this demon lives, and they point at a nearby cave, and Tanjiro goes there and he finds the demon. Now, he also finds the children, and he finds one child that's dead. And Tanjiro gets mad, and he sees the demon and the demon sees him because it's awake and is watching, right? And it tries to attack Tanjiro, but in one swift motion, it's dead. And Tanjiro then, he frees the children and he brings them back to the village. Now, the woman recognizes two of her children, but she asks about a third, and then all Tanjiro gives is this piece of clothing that he found. And the woman starts crying together with the children because that was their sibling or oldest sibling that got killed. Now Tanjiro sees this and he remorses as well, but he has to move on. So the Kasugai Crow comes and he gives Tanjiro his next objective, and Tanjiro completes that objective and then the next objective. And after 6 months, Tanjiro had completed so many objectives without any rest. The crow would always tell Tanjiro after 2 or 3 missions that there was a wisteria mansion nearby where he could rest, but Tanjiro would always refuse because he felt like he didn't need the rest. He felt completely fine. He almost never got injured because using armament, haki, stuff like that. And he asked the crow to just give him his next mission objective, and the crow would. And Tanjiro has slain well over 100 demons, even over 150 demons in those 6 months of him being a demon slayer. And then the crow would ask him if he would want to take a rest now. And Tanjiro, he's kind of tired, and he has had this wound on his shoulder, just a slight wound, and he's like, okay, I'll let that heal because that might affect my demon slayer killing skills. So the crow points Tanjiro into a direction and tells him to go there, and he starts walking that way, and without realizing it, he walks into this massive mansion. And then he sees this man whose forehead has turned light purple, and the man, he speaks in a soft tone and he says, "You must be Tanjiro Kamado, right?" And Tanjiro, he doesn't know, and he says, "Yes, that's me, sir." And he's very polite, of course, because he's always been a polite boy. And the man says, "You're the demon slayer that they talked about 6 months ago." And Tanjiro says, Who talked about?" And then the two little girls, they come out and they greet Tanjiro, and then they say, yes, he's the one who killed all 80% of the demons on the mountains. And the man in front of them, he introduces himself as Ubiyashiki, and he says that he's been looking for talented demon slayers, and that Tanjiro qualifies to become a Hashira, and that he qualifies to be a Hashira threefold because he's already killed so many demons. And Tanjiro, he's sitting there and he's confused. And, of course he accepts the position, and he's still confused, and then Ubayashiki says, "Oh, I'm sorry, let me introduce myself properly. I'm Ubayashiki, and I'm the head of the Demon Slayer Corps." Now Tanjiro, he's like, "Oh," and he connects all the dots, and the crow, he comes sitting next to Tanjiro, and he's like sitting there as if he's very proud of Tanjiro. Now, Ubiyashiki, he says that Tanjiro qualifies to be a Hashira, but that they already have a water pillar Hashira, and that Giyu Tomioka is already the water Hashira. And Tanjiro says, "Ah, yeah, Giyu." And then Ubiyashiki says, "Oh, you know Giyu." And then Tanjiro says, "Yeah, I met him when we were, before I became a demon slayer, before I even knew how to do water breathing." And then Tanjiro says that he doesn't really want to be a Hashira if that meant that Gyu doesn't become a Hashira. And now, Ubiyashiki says, "Oh, but we could have two water Hashiras," but Tanjiro says no, because, that's Gyu's title. And then he asks Ubiyashiki if he could maybe talk to the Flame Hashira one day. And then Ubuyashiki says, "Yeah, of course," and he snaps his fingers. Now, all the Hashiras were listening in on this conversation, and they just all appeared behind Tanjiro. And some of the Hashras, they realize that there's a demon in the box, but they don't say anything yet. And then, Rengoku says you called, and then, he asks Rengoku if he could fill in the request of Tanjiro, and then Rengoku asks Tanjiro, what is it, but he says, what is it, with like his smile and, stuff like that, because he's always happy. And then Tanjiro, he asks him if he knows any technique by the name of Hinokami Kagura. And Rengoku says no, and then he asks him what he means, and then Tanjiro asks if he can perform the first segment or the first move of it. And, you know, Rengoku says that he would like to see it, and Ubuyashiki shows shows that he is allowed to do it. So Tanjiro puts down the box, but he puts it he puts it kind of away from the Hashira because he's a bit scared that they might attack Nezuko. And he does the first move. Now he breathes, and then instantly when he takes that breath, Rengoku is kind of already in a trance, right? And he does the first move, and he does it better than before because he would, while he, in those 6 months while he was killing demons, he would also sometimes try to use the Hinokami Kagura, and he would use the different moves, and he would try to train it. And he did it, and then everybody saw the fire, even Ubuyashiki. And Ubuyashiki asks Rengoku, do you know what this is? And Rengoku says, I don't know Hinokami Kagura. I know for certain that's not a move from the flame breathing category. I think that right there is sun breathing. Now everybody's just sitting there kind of like, whoa, sun breathing? Sun breathing? And Tanjiro is the only one confused, and he asks, "What's is sun breathing?" And then Giyu says, "Sun breathing is the breathing style that made all other styles. It's the breath that every other style is derived from." Ubuyashiki says, "Well, I do have a Hashira title for you." And Tanjiro's confused, and he says, "You will be the Sun Hashira, Tanjiro." And Tanjiro, he says, "Oh, but I don't know the moves that well, and I can use it, but it's nowhere near as strong as my water breathing." And then Ubuyashiki says, "Well, maybe you should train under Rengoku, and maybe you can make him stronger as well, because Rengoku is one of the strongest Hashira that they have right now, and maybe if Rengoku saw sun breathing and some of its moves, he could make himself stronger. And if Tanjiro saw flame breathing, he might be able to learn sun breathing better, which would only make them stronger." That was Ubuyashiki's thought. And Rengoku is delighted. He says, "Certainly," because he wants Tanjiro as a student right now. And Tanjiro, he accepts this, but he then gets his rank updated, and his rank becomes Hashira, and he's the Sun Hashira. Now he's sitting there and he's kind of confused by it all still, and then one of the Hashira says, "We can't make him a Hashira." And Ubuyashiki, he looks over and he sees that it's the Hashira with the scars, or Sanemi, or his name Sanemi. Now, he says that there's a demon in the box, and Ubuyashiki, he sighs and he says, "We know." And they all of the other Hashira, they're in a slight shock, and they're like, "You're just allowing this?" And then Ubuyashiki says that the crow has been making reports over time, and that Giyu and that Urokodaki both have said that Nezuko is a demon unlike any other that does not harm humans. And Tanjiro, he says, "Oh, actually, come on out." And then Nezuko comes out of the box, and she's unfazed by the sun. And the Hashira, they're sitting there confused. And Giyu says, "Did you manage to cure her?" And Tanjiro says, "No. Nezuko was able to conquer the sun." So I have these So he goes into this explanation and he says, I have these three powers that I was born with, and one of them lets me conquer people's minds if they have a weaker willpower than me. But against demons, it kind of just makes me able to control them. Kind of. Nezuko, I don't control her, obviously, but it's been able to make me calm her down, and she has been able to train with me. And over those 6 months, whenever it was nighttime, she would fight with me, especially if it were multiple demons. And one time when we were fighting, she grew her horn and she buffed up, but she didn't attack anybody, but she was able to beat the demons without any sweat. And then that kept happening, and then eventually one day she just came out of her box and she wasn't scared of the sun. And Nezuko, she starts talking and she has a soft, sweet voice. So some of the Hashira, they're kind of flustered, and Sanemi, he doesn't take it, so he goes to strike Nezuko to see if she would attack him back. Now Tanjiro, he blocks this and he tells him to not do that. And then he says, all right, fine. And he cuts himself, and it's mariachi blood, which is what demons like the most. And Nezuko doesn't even look at it. She's just looking at the other Hashira. She's walking up to Shinobu and patting her on the head because she reminds her, of her younger siblings. And Shinobu, she feels like Nezuko is almost like her sister almost, and she's just in this like state of like happiness and smiles. And Giyu, he sees this and he smiles, and all the other Hashira, they smile. And Sanemi is sitting there, and Ubiyashiki, he sees this and he's like, I think that, and he says, I think that proves that Nezuko is on our side. Now the crow, who's on Tanjiro's shoulder, he speaks up and he says, she has killed over 75 demons apart from Tanjiro, because Tanjiro killed 150 and she killed 75. And the Hashira, they're like, oh damn, that makes her Hashira level at least. So, Ubiyashiki, he says, alright then. Then for the first time in history, we have ourselves a demon Hashira. And that's the title that they give to Nezuko. So she gets a little badge that, just proves that she's Hashira, because they can't do the little tattoo thing that they do with the other demon slayers, because Wisteria is poison to demons. And yeah, so she gets a little badge, and she's happy about it, and she's showing Tanjiro, who's, happy too. Now, Rengoku, he wants to train with Tanjiro as soon as possible because he saw that he easily blocked Hanami, which is like, that's quite a feat to already pull off. And Ubiyashiki, he then, tells them to go back to their missions, and then he tells Tanjiro to rest up in the Butterfly Mansion for now. And then he tells Rengoku to also stay there and train with Tanjiro. So Tanjiro, he stays and he rests up because he's been going at it for 6 months without any real rest. And then he meets this girl, or he goes out and he meets this girl, and she goes by the name of Kanoe, and that's what the helpmate Aoi says to him. And she's training, and then Tanjiro, he sees that she's doing a breath style that he doesn't recognize. And then Shinobu, she sees this and she says, she's using the breath style of my older sister, the flower breathing style. And Tanjiro asks, older sister? And then, Shinobu, she says that she got killed by Upper Moon too. And, Tanjiro, he's sad for her and he shows her remorse. And Shinobu kind of feels like Tanjiro really gives off those older brother vibes and asks him if he has a lot of younger siblings. And he says, yeah, I had, but they got killed by the progenitor of demons. And Shinobu says Muzan, and Tanjiro says, yeah, I think that was his name. Because Nezuko got made into a demon, and I heard that only he can do that. Now, Shinobu, she's sitting next to Tanjiro and she's also sad. And then Tanjiro, he gets up and he walks up to Kanoa, who stops fighting, and she asks is anything wrong, because he's Hashira level now, so she has to take orders from him technically. Well, not yet, but she is a student of a Hashira, so she's already part of the Demon Slayer Corps, kind of. And Tanjiro, he says that he would like to train with her, and they train together for like 3, 4 days before Rengoku joins in because he wants to train too. And they all train together, and kind of she actually, like, because of Tanjiro's help, because Tanjiro would look in the book and he would see all the moves and he would help her out and he would correct any mistakes of her, and kind of she would open up a lot, like a lot. She would just talk without having, she wouldn't just take orders, and she would talk when she wanted to, and she would say things. And Shinobu would be happy about this because Kanoa is kind of like her sister now, and yeah, she's just happy for her. And Rengoku, he learns some things about sun breathing and flame breathing. And Tanjiro, he learns multiple things now. He has learned some of the moves of flower breathing. He has learned some of the moves of flame breathing. He has learned a lot about sun breathing, and he can actually use it now for up to 5 minutes in battle. He learned total concentration constant, and he uses water breathing as his main, with sun breathing as his attack, and he actually has been learning flower breathing and flame breathing because he's been training with Rengoku, who's a flame breath user, and with Kano, who's a flower breath user. Now, Kano, she goes to take the final selection exam because it's been 6 months, and she goes to go take the exam 6 months earlier than normal, and she passes easily, just like nor in the normal timeline, and she's very happy. And when she gets back to the mansion, because Tanjiro's still there, and she just runs up to Tanjiro and hugs him, and they kind of have that connection, and she blushes because she just realized what she did. And Shinobu, she saw this and she says that they're cute. Now, she runs off, and then Tanjiro and Rengoku, they continue their training because they are about to leave on a mission together, and they just want to continue training. So Tanjiro actually learned how to use sun breathing for 3 minutes, well, 3 minutes and 30 seconds without getting too exhausted, and he could use up to the four first moves that he had mastered completely. His armament haki had greatly become stronger because, one, it gets stronger from battle, and he had already fought a lot of demons, and now he's training with Rengoku, a fellow Hashira, so his armament had become stronger as well, to the point where he accidentally broke Rengoku's blade, and Rengoku had to get a new one. He has had a better understanding of observation haki, and his observation kind of upgraded to the point where he sees all of the small movements somebody makes, and he can counter them before they even try to make their actual move. So Tanjiro has basically this perfect counter attack before they even try to attack him, and he can see up to 4 seconds into the future now, so that's also pretty nice. His Conqueror's haki has greatly increased as well, to the point where anybody that's under Hashira level will just pass out if he wants. He can control, of course, who to pass out. And he's had this weird dreams about how to use it in other ways, but he hasn't tried that yet. Now, one thing that Tanjiro has done is he has combined a few moves from flower breathing and the other ones, and he combined the last form of flower breathing, because the last form of flower breathing kind of is this sacrificial move, but he readjusted it to where it could be used as a move that's not sacrificial, and it greatly boosts somebody's strength and eyesight and stuff like that for about a minute, but then they'll be very exhausted afterwards. And he created this move using sun breathing, flame, using the 4 breathing styles he knows, and he combined all of that for this one move that will, it's one move, but it's actually many moves combined. And the base breath he uses for it is flame breathing. So Rengoku is trying to learn this move because he saw Tanjiro use it. And what this move does is basically it just makes the person way stronger than as if they would use the breathing normally for a minute, and then they just do many different attacks that are actually other breathing attacks, but they're converted to the flame breath attacks, and they strike at most of the vital spots of demons so that they can't, or I mean, like the legs and arms, and it finishes off with the head. It was made to just quickly take care of a fast demon because Tanjiro saw that, Kano was very fast and Rengoku as well, and he thought that that might become a nuisance if there's a demon that's faster than them. So he made this move. And it's for flame breathing, but it uses the other breathing styles as an example. So Rengoku, he's trying to learn it. Tanjiro, he doesn't call it a form, he doesn't call it like the 7th or 8th form of flame breathing. He just simply calls it Dance of the Fire Flower. And he wants to make more moves like that because he feels like they could be helpful to the demon slayers of the younger generation that aren't as skilled as the old generation. And, Rengoku, he sees this and he's kind of proud of Tanjiro because Tanjiro has been learning under him. Of course, he's been learning under Tanjiro as well. But, they're just making each other stronger, and that's it. Now, they set out to their mission, but this is where this part is going to end. If you guys enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, comment down below. Today's like goal will be 30 likes, so if you guys hit that, I will do part 3. Bit of a lengthy one, but because Tanjiro would definitely learn water breathing faster, he would take final selection faster, and, there's 1.5 years of gap to fill, so 6 more months and Zenitsu and the gang will probably show up. Anyway, with that out of the way, my name is the Dragon Lord, and I'm signing out.
Tell me a story.
There was once a pale man with dark hair who was very lonely.
Why was it lonely?
All things must meet this man, so they shunned him.
Did he chase them all?
He took an axe and split himself in two, right down the middle.
So he would always have a friend.
So he would always